There is a before and an after, a dividing line in the cultural consciousness that separates the myth we were sold from the woman we were forced to finally see. In the beginning, she was the perfect storm of talent, ambition, and marketability. A girl from the small town of Kentwood, Louisiana, who was crafted into the most famous pop star on the planet. Britney Spears did not just enter the music industry. She conquered it, becoming the undisputed princess of a teen pop revolution that defined the end of a millennium. With "Baby One More Time," she unleashed a seismic shift, her schoolgirl fantasy blending innocence with a nascent, powerful sexuality that was as compelling as it was controversial. She was an easy icon to adore, the embodiment of a new kind of American dream, one built on talent shows, Mickey Mouse Club pedigree, and a smile that could launch a billion-dollar empire. We, the public, consumed her image, danced to her beats, and participated in building the pedestal upon which she stood. However, the very machinery that constructed this global phenomenon was also laying the groundwork for its spectacular, public dismantling. By the mid-2000s, the pristine facade began to show hairline fractures, which soon yawned into chasms. The paparazzi's relentless flashbulbs documented not a star's triumphant reign, but a human being's harrowing, real-time collapse. An unraveling that was met not with empathy, but with voracious, judgmental consumption. And while this account does not seek to simplify the profoundly complex legal, familial, and personal intricacies of her life, there is a crucial, often overlooked perspective to confront. One that reframes her narrative not as a straightforward cautionary tale of personal breakdown, but as a brutal, systematic exposé of an entertainment complex that builds its idols for profit, only to cage them when they become difficult to manage. The first part of Britney Spears' story is the chronicle of her construction, her commodification, and the initial, desperate cracks in the foundation that revealed the prison lurking beneath the glittering surface. The genesis of the Britney Spears brand was a masterclass in controlled ambiguity, a delicate balancing act orchestrated by the most powerful players in the music industry. She was presented as a paradox that the public could project their own desires onto. Was she the devout, virginal girl who spoke of waiting for marriage? Or the leather-clad, sweat-sheen seductress of the "I'm a Slave for You" performance at the 2001 MTV VMAs? The industry, in its infinite wisdom, understood that the answer was both. This calculated duality was her commercial engine. It allowed her to captivate pre-teens and their parents while simultaneously pushing the boundaries of acceptability, all under the guise of girl power and youthful expression. From her days on the Mickey Mouse Club, she was groomed within the Disney system, an institution renowned for polishing young talent into safe, bankable stars. This background lent her an air of wholesome credibility, a Trojan horse that allowed a more provocative energy to enter millions of homes. Her success was undeniable, a testament to a formidable work ethic and a preternatural understanding of performance. But the human being Britney was increasingly secondary to the asset. Britney Spears. Every hit single, every Pepsi commercial, every magazine cover was another brick in a fortress of fame, a gilded cage whose bars were not yet visible. The initial signs of strain were not signs of instability, but of a burgeoning agency, a desire to control the narrative of her own life. These early attempts at self-determination were swiftly pathologized by the media and the system that profited from her compliance. Her very public romance with fellow pop star Justin Timberlake was framed as a fairy tale. But its dissolution in 2002 became a pivotal moment in the reshaping of her public persona. Timberlake's strategic media campaign, most notably in the video for "Cry Me a River," which featured a Britney lookalike, painted him as the wounded party and her as the unfaithful villain. He leveraged the narrative to cement his own status as a mature, soulful artist, while she was left to shoulder the blame, her image subtly shifting from America's sweetheart to a potential heartbreaker. This was not merely celebrity gossip. It was a demonstration of the gendered dynamics of fame. A young man's heartbreak could be a career booster, while a young woman's perceived transgression became a permanent stain. This pattern continued with even more force. Her 55-hour marriage to childhood friend Jason Alexander in 2004 was treated as a hilarious, bizarre spectacle rather than what it likely was, a desperate, impulsive act of freedom by a young woman with immense wealth and fame but zero control. The media circus and the swift annulment, orchestrated by her team, reinforced the message. Britney could not be trusted with her own decisions. Later that same year, her marriage to backup dancer Kevin Federline was met with widespread skepticism and ridicule. The public narrative was clear. Britney was making poor choices. The idea that she was simply making her own choices, however imperfect, was never entertained. The system that had created her now positioned itself as the necessary corrective to her wayward judgment. The machine required the compliant, smiling Britney, and any deviation was treated not as a natural part of growing up, but as a glitch that needed to be patched. A product that was malfunctioning. The true, terrifying unraveling, however, was not a private struggle, but a public blood sport. Played out in the pages of tabloids and through the lenses of the paparazzi, the period from 2006 to 2008 was a descent into a uniquely modern kind of hell. One where trauma was a commodity, and the subject was hunted for profit. The paparazzi ecosystem that surrounded her was predatory and relentless. They were not observers. They were active participants in her psychological distress, creating a feedback loop where her pain generated their paychecks. The most iconic and most misunderstood image of this era is that of Britney Spears on February 16, 2007, shaving her head with electric clippers at a hair salon in Tarzana, California. The world saw a meltdown. The media framed it as the definitive proof of her insanity. But to view it through that lens is to miss the profound, desperate symbolism of the act entirely. Shaving one's head is, across cultures, an act of radical transformation, of renunciation, and of reclamation. For Britney, whose long blonde hair was the cornerstone of her hypersexualized commercial image, a symbol of the very femininity she was forced to perform, its removal was a revolutionary act. It was a way of saying, this image you own, this body you critique, this hair you fetishize, I will destroy it myself. It was an attempt to become unrecognizable, to scrape away the brand and see if a person remained underneath. In the same tumultuous period, she attacked a paparazzo's car with an umbrella. This was not random violence. It was the targeted rage of someone who had been pushed beyond human endurance, fighting back against the hunters who had stolen her life. The world watched, laughed, and judged, but few paused to ask what kind of environment, what relentless pressure could drive a person to such a public act of self-annihilation. We were all complicit, consuming the photographs and the headlines that documented her destruction. It was from this manufactured chaos that the architecture of her long-term confinement was engineered. The conservatorship, known in some states as a guardianship. In 2008, following a series of psychiatric holds and amid a heated custody battle with Kevin Federline, her father, Jamie Spears, successfully petitioned the court for control over his daughter. The legal arrangement, typically reserved for the gravely ill or the cognitively incapacitated elderly, granted him near total dominion over the personal life and multi-million-dollar estate of a 26-year-old woman. To the public, it was presented as a necessary, even compassionate intervention. The narrative, carefully managed by her father's legal team and tacitly accepted by a media eager for a simple story, was that Britney was too sick and irresponsible to manage her own life. The conservatorship was the solution, the thing that would save her from herself. And for over a decade, this was the story we were told. Under the conservatorship, the product of Britney Spears was rebooted and relaunched. She released new albums, most notably 2011's Femme Fatale. She embarked on world tours. She secured a landmark, massively lucrative Las Vegas residency, Britney, Piece of Me, which ran from 2013 to 2017 and grossed over $137 million. She served as a judge on The X Factor. To the outside world, she was fixed. The machine was humming again, more profitable than ever. But for those who looked closer, the picture was unsettling. The smile in interviews was often vacant, the eyes distant. Her social media posts, when they existed, felt scripted and sterile. Her performances, while physically precise, at times seemed robotic, devoid of the spark and joy that had defined her early career. Fans began to whisper about the strange, controlled nature of her existence. They called it the Britney bot phenomenon. The system had not healed her. It had institutionalized her. The industry, from record labels to promoters to venues, happily continued to do business with this arrangement. The fact that the star at the center of this billion-dollar enterprise was a legal ward of her father was a disturbing detail everyone had a vested interest in ignoring. The conservatorship was the ultimate control mechanism, ensuring that the asset would continue to perform, generate revenue, and remain manageable. The gilded cage was now a legal one, its lock thrown by a court of law. The first part of Britney's story ends here, not with a breakdown, but with a silent, systematic imprisonment, hidden in plain sight under the dazzling lights of Las Vegas, and the approving applause of a world that thought it had gotten its star back. The illusion of stability was meticulously maintained for years. The Las Vegas residency was a triumph of brand management, a spectacle that promised the return of the iconic Britney Spears, while simultaneously masking the profound silence of the woman trapped within the performance. Night after night, in a theater named for her own show, Piece of Me, she executed the choreography, hit the notes, and flashed the smile that thousands paid to see. But the title itself became a cruel, unintended irony. The residency was not an expression of her artistry. It was the central engine of the conservatorship, a financial machine that generated the revenue used to justify her continued legal bondage. To the public and the industry, the system was working. The product was functional, profitable, and seemingly compliant. Yet, beneath the surface of this perfectly managed calm, a counter-narrative was beginning to stir. One that would not be orchestrated by publicists or controlled by courts. It was born in the digital shadows, fueled by the unwavering dedication of fans who refused to accept the official story. The second part of Britney Spears' saga is the story of that awakening. The slow, deliberate cracking of the facade, the explosive reclamation of a voice silenced for 13 years, and the complex, painful reality of a freedom that is not an end, but a fraught and ongoing beginning. The first tremors of the earthquake that would become the Free Britney movement began not with a lawyer's filing, but with a whisper in the vast, interconnected halls of the internet. In online forums like YouTube and Reddit, a community of fans turned amateur sleuths began to notice anomalies that didn't fit the narrative of a saved and stabilized star. They analyzed her Instagram posts, not for their content, but for their subtext. The 1,000-yard stare and a happy caption. The cryptic messages that seemed to be coded cries for help. They noted the alarming 2019 incident where she abruptly checked herself into a mental health facility, a move her longtime manager framed as a response to her father's ill health. Fans, however, were skeptical. They saw it as a potential punishment for pushing back against the conservatorship's demands, a way to reassert control after she had paused her Vegas work. The movement gained its first major dose of credibility from an unexpected source, a former member of her inner circle. In 2019, her one-time lawyer and conservator of her estate, Samuel D. Ingham III, filed a document stating that Britney was afraid of her father and would not perform as long as he remained in charge. This was a seismic crack in the official narrative. Then, in early 2020, a phone call was leaked from a concerned fan inside the courthouse, who overheard Britney's attorney stating that his client would not resume her career until her father was removed. The fan recorded the audio and shared it online. The Free Britney movement was no longer a conspiracy theory. It was a journalistic lead. Major media outlets, initially dismissive, were now forced to investigate. The fans had spoken too much, and they had been right. They had done what the entertainment industry and the legal system had failed to do. They had listened to the silence and recognized it as a scream. They created a groundswell of public pressure and moral outrage that made it impossible for the story to be ignored any longer, exposing the dark heart of the celebrity industrial complex. That a person could be deemed simultaneously too mentally incompetent to choose her own friends or use her own passport, yet perfectly competent to generate millions of dollars in a demanding, high-stakes performance career. The paradox was the point. It was never truly about incapacity. It was always about control. The dam of silence finally burst on June 23, 2021. In a highly anticipated virtual address to the Los Angeles Superior Court, Britney Spears was given the opportunity to speak directly to the judge overseeing her case. What followed was not a prepared legal statement, but a raw, 20-minute torrent of trauma, a cathartic eruption of a voice suppressed for over a decade. Her testimony, trembling with a mixture of fear and long-suppressed fury, painted a picture of breathtaking oppression that was far worse than anyone had imagined. She described being forced to work against her will, comparing the grueling Las Vegas residency to sex trafficking. She revealed she was put on powerful lithium against her consent, a medication that left her feeling drunk and unable to have a coherent conversation. She spoke of being prevented from removing a birth control IUD because her handlers did not want her to have more children. She detailed a system of constant surveillance, where every conversation, every movement in her own home was monitored. She was not allowed to drive her own car, spend her own money, or see her friends. "I truly believe this conservatorship is abusive," she stated, her voice cutting through the legal formalities. This was more than testimony. It was an exorcism. She was speaking too much, revealing the horrific, mundane mechanics of the system that had held her captive. She named her father as a central figure in her oppression, stating, "I am so angry, it's insane, and I'm depressed." The world listened, stunned. The entertainment industry, which had happily profited from her for years, was forced to confront its complicity. The public, which had danced to Toxic and laughed at the memes, had to reckon with the human cost of their entertainment. We had all accepted the narrative of the crazy pop star without ever questioning the power structures that profited from her compliance. Her speech was a landmark moment in pop culture, transforming her from a passive subject of pity into an active agent of her own liberation. The momentum from her testimony was irreversible. In the months that followed, the legal fortress around her began to crumble. Her father was first suspended as the conservator of her estate, and finally, in November 2021, the conservatorship was officially terminated. The moment was met with global celebration, a collective sigh of relief for a woman who had finally won her freedom. But the triumphant headlines marked the end of a legal battle, not the end of her story. The price of that hard-won freedom is a life irrevocably scarred by a 13-year ordeal. Her post-conservatorship existence, documented almost exclusively through her own, intensely scrutinized social media channels, is a testament to the profound and lasting damage. Her Instagram has become the primary window into her world, and it is a disorienting, often chaotic view for many. The endless spinning dance videos, the cryptic captions, the raw and unfiltered expression. It is the behavior of a woman rediscovering her own agency in real time, without a filter, a manager, or a conservator. She is exploring the boundaries of her own identity, testing what it means to be Britney, not Britney Spears. The public, which demanded her freedom, now often watches with a confused and sometimes critical eye. They expect her to behave in a way that aligns with their concept of healed or grateful. They want a neat, redemptive third act. But this expectation misses the fundamental point of her entire struggle. Britney's freedom is not performative for our benefit. It is messy, complicated, painful, and deeply, profoundly personal. The twirling is not a symptom of instability. For her, it may be a ritual of liberation. The erratic captions are the sound of a voice that was silenced for 13 years, now saying whatever it wants, whenever it wants, however it wants. She is speaking too much again, but this time, it is entirely on her own terms. Her 2023 memoir, The Woman in Me, served as the final, definitive word on her narrative, a chance to tell her story without legal interference or media distortion. In its pages, she detailed the depth of her suffering with a clarity that was both heartbreaking and empowering. It was not just a settling of scores. It was a reclamation of her own history, a final tearing down of the walls built around her by others. The act of telling her story was the final stage of her liberation, the ultimate price she could exact from a system that had tried to own her truth. In the end, the story of Britney Spears is the ultimate indictment of the fame machine. It reveals in brutal, unsparing detail that the price of superstardom can be your very personhood. Her conservatorship was not a bizarre anomaly. It was the logical, chilling extension of an industry that views human beings as assets to be managed, controlled, and exploited for maximum profit. Hollywood, and the culture it influences, fears the free Britney Spears not because she is broken, but because she is a living, breathing reminder of their complicity. Her continued, unpolished presence in the public eye is a constant accusation. She is a monument to the catastrophic cost of our entertainment, and a powerful, permanent warning to every young star who follows in her footsteps. Her freedom was not a gift from the courts, the media, or a benevolent industry. It was a fundamental right she had to wage a brutal public war to reclaim. All we know for sure is that no number of #1 hits, no amount of global adoration, no fortune in the world is worth the freedom to simply live your own life. And Britney Spears, the princess of pop who became a prisoner and then a prophet of her own liberation, has paid a higher price for that simple, profound truth than any of us can possibly imagine. The journey is far from over, but for the first time in over a decade, the path is finally her own.